and welcome to the second KF Virtual Dialogue organized by the Korea Foundation, the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany, Seoul, and Agora Energiewende. We're honored to have a special panel of experts here to talk about green transitions and approaches to green transitions in Korea and Germany, looking at both energy transition on the road to carbon neutrality as well as mobility. I'm Hannah Jeon, Assistant Professor of International Business at Yuha's Graduate School of International Studies, and also Director of the Center for Global Social Responsibility. I'm delighted to be here to moderate today's dialogue and look forward to the fruitful discussion that we will have. Before we begin with our dialogue, I would first like to invite three very special persons to provide brief welcoming remarks. We have with us today the President of the Korea Foundation, President Geun. We also have Peter Winkler, who is Deputy Head of Mission of the German Embassy, Seoul. And we have joining online Jess Scott, Director of International Programs of Agora Energiwende. So perhaps, President Lee, would you like to open today's virtual dialogue with welcoming remarks?
Thank you very much. Dear distinguished guests, friends from all over the world, as President of the Korea Foundation, it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome you all to the 2021 Korea Foundation Virtual Dialogue with Germany. Esteemed Mr. Peter Winkler, Deputy Head of Mission of the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany, Seoul. Esteemed Ms. Jessie Scott, Director, International Program at Agora Energiwende. Is my pronunciation okay? Energiewende. And all of the distinguished speakers joining us here today to share your insights and vision, I thank you all. The Korea Foundation is proud to hold the virtual dialogue series, Approaches to Green Transitions in Korea and Germany, in collaboration with the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany, Seoul, and Agora Energiwende. In 2020, the Korean government launched the Green New Deal to help advance Korea's clean energy transition. And from the government to the private sector, Korea has actively engaged in efforts to develop technology to create a green path to recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. With the experience and achievements we have accumulated so far, Korea has sought to accelerate green global cooperation through the P4G Seoul Summit. At the summit, all participating countries acknowledged that sustainable and green recovery is of utmost importance to combat climate change and promote a transition to clean energy. Korea and Germany, in particular, have focused on coping with this global issue together as front runners in energy transition. Through present day, we have worked collectively to address climate change and make a transition to low carbon energy. Since the establishment of the Germany-Korean Energy Partnership in 2019, we have also bolstered our ties to share lessons and experiences related to green transitions. And last year, the signing of a roadmap on Korean-German energy cooperation took our nations to the next level and solidified our future bilateral cooperation. During the course of today's dialogue, we will focus on new deals and mobility, two areas that necessarily complement one another. Smart mobility in particular is one of the best ways to reach a net zero society, and both Korea and Germany stand out already as leaders in the production of electric and hydrogen vehicles. As green mobility will be part of a progressive strategy to build a net zero future, I expect that there will be many opportunities today to share policies and examples from both countries. Once again, on behalf of the Korea Foundation, I express my sincere gratitude to the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany, Seoul, and Agora Energiewende for co-organizing this dialogue today, and to all our invited experts and guests who have come together here and now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Lee. Yes, that deserves a round of applause. We're also delighted to have with us Peter Winkler, who is Deputy Head of Mission of the German Embassy in Seoul. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Dear President Lee of Korea Foundation, dear Director Scott of Agora Energiewende, dear panelists, most of all, dear listeners to this virtual series today. I'm very pleased to participate in this virtual dialogue on green energy today. And on behalf of the German Embassy, let me first express our appreciation to Korea Foundation for organizing this series. We are also very grateful for the opportunity to co-host today's event with Agora Energiwende. Initiatives and seminars like today's are very important. They offer an excellent platform to share and to exchange further ideas on green recovery, and they also allow us to learn from each other. So I think you would agree with me that this year has been particularly challenging for us on many levels. The COVID pandemic has caused suffering to millions of people. It is important, however, that we don't lose out of sight the climate crisis. Multiple vaccines bring us closer to the end of the pandemic. This also gives us a chance now to rebuild better and greener. Germany recognized this opportunity, and we are determined to make the right decisions for our future. Investments in renewable energy, biodiversity, and green mobility will ultimately allow us to transform into a sustainable society and also into a sustainable economy. Green mobility is the key to reaching our climate goal for 2030 and also for reaching the greenhouse gas neutrality, which Germany would like to acquire by 2045. We think that we are on the right track when it comes to e-mobility and hydrogen research, but still there is a long way to go. There is many questions. How do we inspire the public for green transportation? How do we engage other sectors of the economy? And most notably, how can we encourage research into green energy alternatives? The answers to these questions will ultimately determine the success of our economy's transformation. And we know we cannot do it alone. It's teamwork. In this team effort, we see Korea as a like-minded, ambitious partner. In fact, Korea and Germany share many similarities. We are both highly industrialized, export-oriented nations. We have a focus on manufacturing, and we both have a high interest in a sustainable and affordable energy supply. A major platform, President Lee just mentioned it, for cooperation is our energy partnership, which we started in 2019. Korean and German expertise and the spirit of innovation complement each other very, very well. Just to name some examples, hydrogen, but also renewable energy. It is in partnership, and it is only in partnership, that we can revolutionize the energy sector, that we can achieve greenhouse gas neutrality, and that we can overcome the climate crisis. And President Lee also just mentioned it. Korea recently held the P4G summit, and I think Korea has embarked on the right course there. Today we have some great speakers, some great panelists here today. I really look forward to the presentations, and I'm convinced that they will offer valuable insights into how we can move green transition and green mobility forward. I'm grateful to be here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler. We're also delighted to have with us Ms. Jessie Scott, Director of International Programs at Agora Energiewende, who joins us online. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I regret that I am not with you in Korea. It would be very nice to visit, and I hope to do so when the next opportunity comes. It is Agora's honor to co-host this webinar with the Korea Foundation and the German Embassy in Korea. And of course, it is a very timely webinar with the discussion on climate neutrality, net zero climate goals, gaining momentum around the world. And we've seen ambitious pledges in Germany, Korea, and most other industrial nations. Agora, since its establishment as a non-profit, non-partisan think tank in 2012, actively works for the energy transition and climate protection in Germany, also in the European Union, and internationally through various partnerships with local institutions, like we have in Korea. From 2018, we've been expanding our expertise areas from the power sector and renewables also to hydrogen and to heavy industry. And we've been expanding our scope from working in Central Europe to also Latin America, South Africa, South Asia, and finally, China, Japan, and of course, Korea. We hope that Agora's methods, building evidence, promoting policy recommendations, facilitating dialogue with stakeholders can contribute to the energy and climate transition debate also in Korea. We, like the other two speakers, very much see climate protection as the new engine of development for the 21st century economy. In order to achieve net zero, climate neutrality, deep decarbonization, technology innovation and development roadmaps need to be defined, and policy options need to be elaborated to implement those roadmaps. And Korea, of course, is a very important example of how to do technological and industrial development hand in hand with decarbonization in line with the climate agenda. As in Germany, we think that not only are climate commitments good for the economy and for the people, but they also provide opportunities to enterprises to succeed in securing next generation technology leadership. So we hope that today will deepen further collaboration between Germany and Korea. Agora, as I mentioned, is already collaborating with several Korean institutions today. We have a Korean researcher on staff, and we partner particularly with local think tanks with a similar non-partisan, non-profit mission in your national dialogue. So I hope this webinar will be a good opportunity to enhance the exchange of information, ideas, good practices between the stakeholders from the public sector, academia, and the non-profit think tanks gathered today. And I wish you all a good exchange during the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Again, hopefully we can see you next time in person. Now I think it would be a great time to get into our dialogue in earnest. And today we have two major topics for discussion. The first looks at energy transition and carbon neutrality in the cases of Korea and Germany. And the second examines trends and innovations in mobility for the two countries. Each of our four speakers will have up to 10 minutes to give their presentation. And after the four presentations, we will have a lively dialogue of 20 minutes with our panelists and also fielding questions from our virtual audience. I will also do my best to keep the dialogue lively, but also timely. And with that in mind, I would like to introduce Professor Chung Suh-Yong, professor of the Division of International Studies at Korea University, and he will be presenting on Korea's efforts toward a carbon neutral society. Professor Chung, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Especially my special thanks goes to the organizer, President of the Korea Foundation, to this important event. Well, President Lee, in his opening remarks, mentioned that Korea just hosted a P4G summit meeting successfully. I think my presentation can be related to that topic in a broader sense, how Korea has made its efforts to address climate change toward the carbon neutral society. So talking about the P4G again, Korea's, the reason why Korea successfully finished the P4G summit meeting was dates back to the several years when, for instance, President Lee Myung-bak developed the low carbon greenhouse policy, and then at that time Korea was very active at the international scene in addressing climate change. And after that, the other president also worked on the climate change. Now the President Moon, based on these achievements, made further efforts actually to build more concrete leadership in international society to share not only Korean experiences, also Korea's way of contributing its ability to help developing countries, even making cooperation with other developed world, including Germany. So in the sense that I would like to say that the current Korean climate policy has a consistent development history from the Lee Myung-bak through Park Geun-hye and now with Moon Jae-in. So coming to President Moon's Moon administration's climate change policy, I would divide the Moon's administration policy into three different parts. When the Moon started its office, then President Moon introduced the energy transition policy, putting a lot of emphasis on the boosting the renewables. And then, as President Lee mentioned in his opening remarks, that last year in July, the President Moon announced a Green New Deal policy of Republic of Korea that is also largely in line with the global efforts to address climate change in the context of the post-COVID-19. One of the leaders includes the European Union, where Germany belongs to. And then, end of the last year, President Moon, current Korean government, also further announced the policy on the carbon neutral society, and then targeting at becoming a carbon neutral society in 2050. And 2050 is a generally important target year at the international level due to the general consensus that all the countries of the UNFCCC have been discussing about. In the sense that I would say that Korea is on the right track actually to make its efforts together with other partner countries of the world. And then let me just give you some quick snapshots on the current status of Korea's carbon neutral policy. As you can see that there are 10 focused areas of the 2050 carbon neutral policy, including accelerated energy transition. That's one of the key focused issues that we're going to discuss about today. Transformation of the industry toward the carbon neutral society. Future mobility, also another focused area of today's webinar. Low carbon cities and ocean and land use, and promotion of the future low carbon industry, green economy ecosystem for startups, and the circular economy, just a transition, local community-based approach, public awareness. This is not my personal points that I developed. I brought these 10 points from the current government's discussions on how to make a detailed policy implementation of the 2050 carbon neutral policy of Republic of Korea. So in the sense that I think that it can help all the audience at this time who are interested in knowing about the Korean carbon neutral policy in a better way. Also, in terms of the technologies, though, I think these days that in climate area, importance of the technology has become increased a lot more than before, and there are several reasons why. Number one, I would say that guiding the constitution of the global climate efforts is, I would say, the Paris Agreement. And the focus of the Paris Agreement is to implement low carbon policies, low carbon economy policies of the member countries in the sense that driving force, in other words, that the engine of the growth of the low carbon economy should be promoting low carbon technologies. And not only R&Ds, also commercializing those low carbon technologies by securing enough financial resources, also building the capable and then efficient, effective institutional infrastructures along with others. In that sense, as you can see that Korea identified about 10 focused technologies. This is the plan of the Ministry of Science and ICT, including solar, wind, hydrogen, bioenergy, advanced industrial process, low carbon transportation, digital, CCUS, building efficiency, low carbon petrochemistry, and low carbon steel and cement. So some of them used to be core elements of Korea's actually development, such as the steel. And then, as you can see here, that even Korean government will actually lead global technology development and deployment in the decarbonization of all these traditionally energy-intensive technologies. In the sense that, as you can see, that how much Korea can be, effectively address the climate change challenges. And then, as I said, that all these things can be eventually done by developing good institutional arrangements. In the sense that Korea has shown that its plan that has been reviewed recently, though, by the government, that Korea will strengthen its institutional arrangement to support all these good plans, including, according to the sources that I have, that the government now considers to introduce Carbon Neutral Act in the first half first half of this year. Also, climate change response fund will be secured to support additional R&Ds. Also, committee on the carbon neutral has just been set up to guide some of the major directions of the Korean government and other stakeholders in Korea to achieve the carbon neutral society by 2050. And then, at the international level, I would say that around actually this year, Moon administration has become more active than before by actively participating in global efforts, and including the US-led climate change summit meeting that was held in April. And as I just said, the P4G summit meeting, in this case, Korea was the host the P4G summit meeting. And the Korean government is scheduled to go to G7 meeting. I'm sure that President Moon will actively emphasize the importance of the climate change issues by introducing the details of the carbon neutral policy of the Republic of Korea. And ultimately, that everything will be wrapped up, as I think that in November in Glasgow, United Kingdom, in the occasion of COP26. There are several important agendas that can be considered and discussed by the member countries, including climate finance and others. And then to achieve all these discussions goals, that eventually I'm sure that all the leaders of the world would emphasize the importance of the realizing carbon neutral society by 2050. And then, as you can see also, that Korea has been very active in supporting the various international organizations and initiatives, such as the Global Green Growth Institute, that is headquartered in Seoul, Korea, having the 34 member countries already. And then it has become one of the major global climate change organization, especially focusing on helping out the developing countries. And then Korea is the host country of the Green Climate Fund, which is one of the two major climate finance organizations in the UNFCCC process. So Korea has been continuously active in global scene in addressing climate change by initiating the initiatives and participating in the initiatives and also supporting the international organizations. So on this basis, that I think that specifically Korea can be very active in developing cooperation with Germany in various ways. I pointed out 4 points, and the first one is, as I indicated, that we can work together in various initiatives, such as the G20 and conference parties of the UNFCCC, G7, GGGI, and GCF. These are just the examples. I can list a lot more, so there are already good grounds. And then I am stressing this because I know that there are already pretty similar approaches between the countries in these venues. It's just a matter of how to strengthen the existing cooperation in these venues. And technologies, including the low carbon mobility and the renewables are some of the good examples that we will focus on today. And just the transition should be also put on the agenda in terms of cooperation between the countries, because that every country, especially Korea, stressed the importance of phasing out the coal-fired power plants. And then I know that there are very good policy developments and implementation inside Germany in this context, in the context of the restructuring coal power plant. And then I'm sure that we can further work together to address these issues. Also, we can work together on the issues of the green ODA. I know that Germany has a very good ODA implementation agencies all over the world, and we have a KOICA, Exim Bank, and other private actors who have become also active in this area. So for the just transition to helping out the developing countries, in other words, that Korea and Germany can work very closely. Finally, research and education cannot be excluded in the sense that research on policy institutions are specifically important from my point of view. Also, there are already a lot of R&D activities, and I stress that not only the R&D, we also do research on the current status of R&D between the countries so that we can identify more focused areas of collaboration. And then university education also cannot be excluded once again in this endeavor. So having said that, thinking about the P4G toward the COP26 this year, and then having good discussions with Germany, and then based on that, I do hope that this webinar can provide a good platform Suh-Yong to make a concrete actually outcomes out of the discussions, not only by the government, also by the universities, research think tanks, and the stakeholders. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Chung. I'm sure that your presentation provides a very strong foundation from which we can actually compare Korea's case with Germany's case towards carbon neutrality. And on that note, we have with us Matthias Deutsch from Agora Energiewende Senior Associate, who is joining us this morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, thank you from my side. Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. I'm going to present a little bit on our recent work on a climate-neutral Germany. And as you have already heard from our director, Jesse Scott, we are basically an independent and non-partisan think tank. And I leave it there because what we came up with is two big scenarios for Germany as a whole in the last 4 months. One with the blue sky in the background is on a climate-neutral Germany 2050. And then recently we came up with a climate-neutral Germany already by 2045. And both describe pathways to climate neutrality or net zero that take into account cost, but also acceptance of the general population. So let me start by just portraying and sketching where Germany stands today with respect to greenhouse gases, renewables, and the general kind of policy background. Now, Germany has a target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 40% until 2020. So did we meet that goal? Well, yes, luckily in 2020 we had kind of minus 42% below the 1919 level, but admittedly without COVID-19 we would have missed that goal. So therefore it's important to understand that we have to increase our efforts and to speed up the energy transition and our pathway towards climate neutrality. Now for renewables in the electricity sector, we have seen a continuous growth since 2000. Today, we had around 45% of renewables in power generation. You see the green part in the diagram going up. And at the same time, we have a reduction in nuclear only at 11% lately. So we have been driving renewables through a stable investment framework. Wind and solar are the backbones. We have a nuclear phase-out scheduled for 2022. The coal phase-out is scheduled for 2038. And it's interesting to see where the European emission trading system carbon price is heading recently at around 50 euros per ton of carbon dioxide. So there will be strong forces to drive out coal anyway. And then this is just the electricity sector. But the economy is more than electricity. And so we have to work on the other sectors, on heat, on industry, on the transport sector. That's a priority for the future. But let me just tell you what happened recently in Germany. In May of this year, Germany strengthened its climate ambitions through the federal government to reach net zero by 2045. And that came after a spectacular decision by the Constitutional Court. Our Constitutional Court ruled that we could not just keep doing the same stuff, because this would limit the freedom of future generations. And therefore the government decided, we have to increase our ambitions. We have to deliver a 65% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, and then become net zero by 2045. And as it happens, Agora Energiewende, some weeks before, had just published this study, this scenario on a climate neutral Germany 2045, if you wish, looks a bit like a blueprint for the federal government to develop its increasingly and more ambitious policy. And so I'll just share kind of the key insights from this scenario on a climate neutral Germany 2045 with you. So how can we do this? And this is a scenario about strategies, technologies. It's not about the policy instruments. That's the final thing that needs to be delivered. Now, our scenario is a growth scenario. It's not about degrowth. It's not about big-time sufficiency and behavioral change. It's essentially something that can be done. That's what our consultants tell us. And it, of course, involves major investment, let's say around 75 billion euros annual additional investment to reach it by 2045. And the big picture to reaching this goal looks like this. It comes in 3 steps. It's a lot of stuff on this slide, but I'll guide you through it. The first step is the blue one, a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 65% until 2030. The second step is reducing further greenhouse gas emissions by minus 95% until 2045. And then there's the hardest, the toughest 5 percentage points that are really difficult to deal with. And there, the only way we see is to use negative emission technologies. And here you see some abbreviations, BECCS and DACS. So it's bioenergy carbon capture and storage, or direct air carbon capture and storage. We need to compensate for those emissions that we cannot mitigate. That's cement and agriculture, by and large. And so by this combination, the 3 steps that I described, we can reach climate neutrality. Let's have a brief look at the first step. The first step in blue is really in the energy sector, which is the largest bar. If you look at the little bars there, it's minus 207 megatons per year. It involves a faster coal phase out already by 2030. That's very important. It involves a lot of renewables, renewable electricity. We will need to start deploying hydrogen as a renewables backup in the electricity system. In the transport sector, we're talking about 14 million electric cars, and 30% of road freight kilometers are also electric. In industry, this is about low carbon steel, what's called DRI steel, direct reduced iron steel. There's also a need for a coal phase out in industry, and hydrogen starting. If you look down to buildings, we need to retrofit our buildings. Maybe not as intensely as some people have suggested, but there needs to be a minimum retrofit rate to prepare our buildings for what's the best technology we have, which is direct electric heat pumps. Use renewable electricity and then use heat pumps to electrify buildings. And then this keeps going after 2030 in the second step, in the pink step. And the over inside, of course, is we cannot deploy and cannot continue to deploy fossil technologies based on fossil fuels. This needs to become low carbon technologies, because otherwise they will be in the stock of assets for a long time. And we have to phase it out as fast as possible. Now, a major building block of all this is the energy sector, as I said. And so it's a lot about scaling up renewables. We're talking about 70% in the electricity system by 2030. And then, of course, it needs to approach 100% by 2045 or a bit earlier. This is a major investment into renewable energy capacities. Is it feasible? I'd like to draw your attention to the right part of that figure. In the right part, you can see what we need per year between 2021 and 2030. It's around 10 gigawatts PV, photovoltaics, around 2 gigawatts offshore wind, and around 5 gigawatts onshore wind per year as capacity additions. Can that be done? Yes, it can, we think, because in the fine print in black, a bit lower in the middle to the right, you can see what Germany has deployed in the past. And actually, in the best years, Germany has deployed nearly 10 gigawatts of PV, around 2 gigawatts of offshore, and around 5 gigawatts of onshore wind. So this is actually feasible. We are not there today. We're lagging with renewables deployment, but it can be done, and we need to really put our effort into scaling this up, kickstarting a major investment and scale up of renewable energy deployment. That's the key insight from this study. There's a lot that we have not covered in the study. Again, as I said, it's about strategies and technologies, but scenarios don't deliver greenhouse gas emission reductions. We need policy instruments, and we need them in all sectors. This is just an overview. We need them in energy, buildings, transport, and industry. A lot of detailed work in the absence of very high carbon prices. If one day in the EU and Germany we approach higher carbon prices, maybe they can do the job here and there. But in the absence of high carbon pricing, we need dedicated policy instruments to really drive the pathway towards a climate neutral Germany. And with that, thank you very much for listening here. I'm looking forward to your questions, and you can later then download several studies from us on this whole climate neutral Germany work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. A round of applause from our studio. So with that presentation, I think we have a great background as to the macro dynamics behind green transitions, specifically energy transition and the path to carbon neutrality. So maybe we can switch gears just a little bit and zoom in kind of on this topic of mobility. And so we will also have one case of Korea as well as one case in Germany. So first, I would like to invite Dr. Park Tae-yong, who is Director of the External Cooperation Department at Korea Automotive Technology Research Institute, or KATEC. And so I'd like to invite Dr. Park to give his presentation. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for introduction, Professor John. First of all, it's my great pleasure to participate in Korea Foundation Virtual Dialogue. Today, I would like to talk about Korean policy and technology development for the future mobility. In this presentation, I would like to introduce about who is KATEC and Korean strategy for the future automotive to reach the net zero mobility. First of all, KATEC celebrated 30th anniversary in last year. The headquarters of KATEC is located at Cheonan City, and it is about 1.5 hours from Seoul, Korea. We have 566 researchers are working on the various automotive area and consists of 13 R&D divisions and 28 R&D centers, including regional branch. We are focusing on core technology development for fuel cell electric vehicle and battery electric vehicle, autonomous vehicle, and V2X technology based on 5G and LTE and Wave protocol. We have 6 major roles. Mainly we support SME, which is a small and medium enterprise, to research and develop new auto component through Korean government R&D project. And KATEC also support government to plan automotive R&D policy and large-scale project. And we do perform assessment testing and certification testing for automotive component to export. And also, we also transfer technology to company when they need it and provide technical training and information. Now, I'd like to introduce Korean strategy for future mobility. Our vision is to transform auto industry ecosystem into net zero mobility by 2025. To do that, we need to accelerate dissemination and expand market share. To build a net zero mobility friendly society system is very important, and new technology development for net zero mobility is critical. Also, transforming auto industry ecosystem into net zero mobility is important. When we pursue these 3 things right, then net zero mobility will come sooner than we expect in Korea. Next, I would like to go over the status of a fuel cell electric vehicle. Maybe a German may be interested in this topic. Currently, Hyundai developed and released the Nexo SUV in 2018. Since then, 9,500 about vehicles were sold by 2020. I just checked the March number. It's more than 12,000 vehicles were sold, and they're waiting to sell. And 51 hydrogen refilling chargers are in operation around Korea. I also double-checked today, and it was 69, increased by a large number within a year. For the future, based upon the strategy for the future mobility and its market report, which released by the government on October 2020, our goal is to distribute 200,000 fuel cell electric vehicle and to establish 450 refueling charger by 2020. I checked the number around the world, only 450 refueling charger in globally. So our target is very large, I said. Next is the battery electric vehicle. Currently, total 124,000 electric vehicles were sold, and 50,000 chargers were installed around Korea until 2020. And you know, only 3 electric vehicle models were introduced in 2011, and now it increased up to 18 electric vehicle models in 2020. And in 2021, just 2 or 3 months ago, Hyundai just released Ioniq 5. And it's getting popular in Korea. People are waiting to get it. So it will be, you will see more number of EV on the road. And even Ioniq 6 is ready to launch this year. For the future, government will support, For the future, government will support R&D for the core component for electric vehicle and increasing number of charging infrastructure. Our goal is to distribute 1.13 million electric vehicles and to establish 500,000 chargers by 2025. To accelerate dissemination, what we should do is we should be able to charge electric vehicles in everywhere and anytime. That's what I set the phrase. In order to do that, we need to install charger in parking lot, at the apartment complex and gas station on the highway, and big mart everywhere. And also, affordable price is very important, and it should be a similar price to the gasoline or diesel vehicle. Through this successful dissemination, we can expect to achieve 24% of greenhouse gas reduction until 2030. From now on, let me talk about technology innovation to reach net zero mobility. I think that this subject is a little bit far different from the previous topic, so I'll go slow. Our goal is to achieve the world's best green car technology in the future. We'll focus on improving energy density of battery, heat management system, and lightweight material for EV, so we can go driving further. This technology development will contribute to driving further like IC. Well, I keep saying internal combustion engine because we are driving right now, so we should be challenging to those current technology to sell more EV and fuel cell vehicle. And high efficiency stacks, well, the stack is using in a fuel cell in which generate the electricity with chemical reaction with hydrogen and air and O2. Improving durability of fuel cell vehicle will be researched and developed. Well, we want higher efficiency stack system. Moreover, there are 4 challenging projects for natural mobility, such as recycling CO2, producing green hydrogen, and hydrogen tram, and recycling resource from used battery and hydrogen storage. I think, yeah, this is a little bit details of what we are working on right now as an R&D project for electric vehicle. Korean government is investing 60 million euro for R&D from 2018 to develop core component part for electric vehicle. This project focused on core components such as EV pure platform and battery system and electric motor and conversion system and so forth. Those are focusing on new technology development with high efficiency. Of course, there are batteries and motors out there already and sold in the electric vehicle, but we want higher efficient component. In case of battery, the density of a lithium-ion battery will be raised up to 250 watt-hour kilogram to 350 hour per kilogram in near future. It means we can drive more distance in the same car. For the fuel cell project, we are also developing a core system for the garbage truck. I mean, special purpose truck. I mean, it is converting from the conventional CNG truck to a hydrogen fuel cell truck. As you can see in the picture, there are, oh no, actually, next picture, I forgot. In the left-hand corner, we can see there are 2 stacks installed instead of 1 stack like in passenger vehicle. Because we need more power in this kind of special purpose truck, and we can just put more stacks in it. If you need, well, passenger vehicle, you put 1 stack. For the garbage truck, like you need more power, then you put 2. And if you have like a long haul trucks, and you put maybe 3. So you can get more power from that. So sorry. For transforming our auto industry into net zero mobility ecosystem is very important. And Korean government will support 1,000 companies to transform conventional auto company into future mobility part as a main business until 2030. And we'll establish the platform for the SME to enter into a green car market as a new player. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Park. I think you've given us a really comprehensive overview of the, I suppose, hopeful message and the technological innovations taking place in mobility and how that can contribute to the green transition in Korea. And we also have with us, I believe, Mr. Rene Konenberg, Managing Director of Audi Volkswagen Korea and Chairman of Korea Automobile Importers and Distributors Association. So hopefully he can provide the German perspective as well. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Rene Konenberg, Managing Director of AVK. I'm actually sitting, I hope it's not too loud, I'm sitting at the exhibition show which we are doing at the moment, Go to Zero, where we show actually our overall concept to the public here. So maybe there's a little bit of noise in the background. Very nice to have this opportunity. Great to see how my speakers beforehand have already looked at it. As you know, climate change is having an impact on our daily lives. And as you heard from the panelists before me, I think it's a global focus. Many countries are stepping efforts to address this issue. We heard before the Korean government has set a goal to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. US President Biden put the climate crisis on a top priority. Europe will cut the CO2 emission by at least 55% of the 1990 value. The transportation sector represents 14% of the global CO2 emission, and the Volkswagen Group, the global carbon footprint was actually 369 million tons. That's representing 2% of the global figure. If the Volkswagen Group would be a country, we would be ranked alongside the 10th largest emitter, which is the UK. So therefore, Volkswagen Group is taking responsibility by being the first automaker to commit to the Paris Climate Agreement. And what kind of levers do we have and what are our aims and goals? Under our initiative, Go to Zero initiative, it's called, the Volkswagen Group aims to reduce carbon footprint by 30% by 2025 compared to 2050. This is a holistic approach. It's taking across the whole life cycle of the products, so really from production to the vehicle usage as well as recycling. Let's come into detail. Lever 1, focus on achieving carbon neutral in the supply chain and in the production. Lever 2, focus on acceleration and electrification to transition to e-mobility. Then the lever 3 involves using green electricity throughout a vehicle user phase, the total user phase. And level 4 is about offering second life and recycling of batteries. Now, let's come to the production, lever 1. In terms of production, Volkswagen Group aims to reduce carbon footprint by 45% compared to 2010. To this end, our plants are switching our energy supply to renewable energy. And how do we do that? For example, if we are looking at the power plant in Wolfsburg, we move it from coal to gas. Another interesting figure would be 11 of our 16 plants worldwide are powered by green electricity since 2020. Audi Brussels, for example, was certified as the world's first CO2 neutral plant in the premium segment. If you look at other plants, like for example, the plants in Zwickau, it's using green electricity from Volkswagen, it's a GmbH, Volkswagen Kraftwerk, powered by hydroelectric power plants, wind and solar package. If you look at America, Chattanooga, there will be a new plant established. We are installing solar panels, and this plant will run completely on green electricity from 2022. Now, in terms of supply chain, Volkswagen Group work with extensive number of suppliers around the world. So for the Audi brand, for example, we have 14,000 suppliers in about 60 countries. That's enormous, yeah. And therefore, we are monitoring with them during the procurement process. That's really, really critical. That and we ask them to specify the use of green electricity in tenders. Our components, we are trying to get also binding targets on the components. As for the CO2 emission, some are unfortunately unavoidable in the supply chain and in the production. So we are investing in environmental projects, whereby this fact is really, really small, but still we are investing in there. So globally, the group is investing in forest protection and restoration on Indonesian island, for example, just around the corner here from Korea. Audi Volkswagen Korea, we are taking also part of this strategy, global strategy. So for the last 2 years, we planted around 53,000 trees, and this effort will continue in the future. But of course, the offset is not the major aim. We really go into reducing CO2 in the production. Now come to Lever 2, which is the vehicle usage. This represents actually, if you
dear, Mr. Konovarik? Okay, I think.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, please continue. Thank you.
Okay. Back in Lever 2, I was just at Lever 2. Back in 2015, we announced our roadmap E. This was pretty a bold move at the time, probably the right decision, or very sure the right decision. Now other manufacturers are following us. I think the e-mobility is really the technology which is just on the rise. And this is also great news, of course, for the climate. If you look at the Volkswagen Group is investing a total of 35 billion euros by 2025 to become the leader in e-mobility. We are launching some of 70 pure models electric pure models by 2030. In 2019, just to give you a little bit of an example, in 2019, we delivered 73,000 fully electric vehicles. In 2020, we delivered already 231,000 units. And this is sort of like 3 times more than in 2019. And that puts the group currently on the 2nd rank in the world. In 4 years' time from now, the group aims to deliver 3 million fully electric vehicles, which will account for 20% of the group's total sales. For Korea, we announced that we will launch 8 electric vehicles by 2023. So we are making progress. Following the launch of the Audi e-tron here in Korea in 2020, the Audi brand just last week launched the e-tron GT, and the Sportback will also come. So within the product offensive, we are also having the same product offensive here in Korea. Next year, we will launch also the ID.4. Concerning the platforms, and I think this is a big topic for the Volkswagen Group. The platform we are applying for the e-tron is, for example, the MLB Evo platform. In principle, the MEB platform, and you see it also in the presentation, the MEB platform is the technical backbone on our e-offensive strategy. It offers a lot of long-range, roomy interior, and outstanding performance. Volkswagen ID3, ID4 is based on this platform, and I think this platform will be a sort of industry standard. Ford Europe announced that they are using also this platform and producing 600,000 cars in the future. In total, just to give you a quick number, we are thinking till 2030 to sell on this platform 19 million cars. So now come to lever 3, which is support investment in renewable energies. With lever 1 and 2, we're still only more or less halfway to the carbon neutrality. So charging with green electricity contributes pretty much for the other half. We established in Germany a company which is called Elli, and our drivers in Europe, which are purchasing and charging, then can charge the car with green electricity, which is fed from the grid from renewable resources such as wind power, solar energy, or hydrogen. Going a step further, from 2022, Volkswagen Group electric vehicles will be equipped with a bi-directional charging function, which allows sort of like the electricity stored in the electric vehicle and then using the renewable energy to be transmitted back to the electrical grid. Now coming for the last lever, which is second life and recycling. The battery accounts for 40% of an electric vehicle. This will be important, and we expect sort of like a large number of batteries. If you think of a car life is around about maybe 10 years. So at the end of the 2020s, so in 2030s, we'll see that these batteries are coming back. So what we're doing there is once the batteries are not longer be charged with their full capacity, we will give them actually a second life as a mobility energy storage system, and using it such as, for example, mobile charging robot in our plants. The other part, I think that's probably the bigger part, is that we will recycle these batteries. We have a pilot plant in Salzgitter. Volkswagen Group will extract the available raw materials from there and use these materials for our production. We are aiming to achieve a recycling rate of more than 90%. Actually, as it looks like, we are looking at even going higher to 95%. So Go to Zero is gaining momentum. As you can see, Go to Zero is far more than just a small little program. It reflects really a company holistic approach to the climate protection. Volkswagen is living up to the responsibility, and also Volkswagen Korea here, Audi Volkswagen Korea, will also pursue Go to Zero and participate in this journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Koneberg. Oh, now we can see you. So thank you very much for your presentation, especially to help us better understand green initiatives and direction of Audi Volkswagen. And now we are now at the highlight, or the second highlight of this dialogue, and that really is to have some more interaction among the panelists and to receive some questions from our virtual audience. We are a little bit over time, and so I will try to make sure that we have enough time to get through as many questions as possible and to hear from all of our speakers. So perhaps I can start us off a little bit with some questions, and then we'll turn to some questions from our audience. So Professor Chung, when you spoke in your presentation, we're looking at very macro levels, policy initiatives, also continuity in policy among the previous administrations. And oftentimes when we kind of see from the big picture, we tend to highlight the positive, the positive aspects of what seems to be going well when it comes to energy transition. I'm wondering if maybe you could balance out the discussion and perhaps talk about one or two key obstacles that you see when it comes to energy transition in Korea. And it would be wonderful if perhaps in 1 or 2 minutes you would be able to share with us.
Well, it's always difficult to talk about the obstacle side of the issues. because once we want to talk about them, then there can be many obstacles that we eventually need to address. I think at this time, generally speaking, they are one of the main obstacles that maybe we can immediately fix is the sort of duration of the administration by the presidents. We only have one fixed 5-year term of the president. And then in order to realize all these climate policy in a more consistent way, it might be better for us to have a more continuous in the same tone of the policy implementation and development. In the sense that that's the initial, fundamental issue that I don't think it's an obstacle, but it's a fundamental issue that we need to live on. And then at the micro level, I think the whole society of the Korea needs to talk more frankly about how we can bring up the very idealistic or practical outcome of energy mix. And then sometimes that because of the sensitivity of some technologies that I have seen that Korean society has been divided into two, and I don't think which is good. So there is another process of making all these different stakeholders putting together and find out the one consensus-based solutions ultimately in order to achieve the net zero 2050. So I'm hoping that we can have that in the near future.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Professor Chung. And that actually leads in really well to a question that I was going to ask Matthias about, especially with regards to things like policy continuity and maybe consensus building among stakeholders. We did talk today about policy directions, kind of big picture items, but we also talked about the important role of research institutions and think tanks, so aside from government as well. But we also know that there are other stakeholders, for example, international organizations, NGOs, we have investors, as well as the public at large. And so I wonder if, Matthias, you can talk a little bit about Germany's case in terms of who are the kind of key stakeholders you hope to get on board, and what would be the most effective way to get them on board with regards to green transitions, or if you feel that Germany's been quite successful in terms of consensus building, what has made you so successful in that aspect?
Thank you for the question. I think there's still enough work to do to get stakeholders on board sufficiently. Let me say maybe the one thing that's partly very obvious, but sometimes it's somehow hidden, because with all the strategies that we and others lay out, and there's a large overlap on what I heard from Volkswagen on electrification of transport and others, in the end, it's the classical policy and the political discussion about who's actually carry the burden and who's paying, because in the end, it's a classic question of cost allocation. And just to get this idea across, either, because there's a lot of investment and also refinancing questions, and either you manage that through your tax system, and most developed countries have a kind of progressive tax system, so those who have the stronger shoulders carry more of the burden, progressive tax system, or you ratepayers, like electricity ratepayers or gas ratepayers, others carry more of the cost. And then it's more of a regressive effect. So I would say part of what we are going through right now in Germany is to understand how, and that's the classical political discussions between parties of the, let's say, more conservative or more social democrat or left political spectrum, is finding a way through carrying the cost. And it is particularly true for instruments like where economists would say that's the 101 of every standard economics textbook: price the externality, make carbon more expensive. And exactly there you can see right now where Germany is struggling to find a pathway. Who's going to pay for that? And is there a compensation for those lower income households who may pay relatively more of their income for higher carbon pricing? I think that's the big picture on where we stand today. Even if everybody agrees, finding the cost allocation, getting that right, that's the big political struggle.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And certainly there's a lot of homework that needs to be done both in Korea as well as Germany if we're going to kind of transition successfully to where we hope to be. But perhaps maybe we can now move to a little bit more hopeful light as we enter the last two questions for today. And Mr. Park, excuse me, for Dr. Park, you mentioned before about the innovations that were happening with regards to mobility in Korea. Perhaps you could talk and really highlight one or two key points in the Korean kind of mobility ecosystem that Korea seems to be doing really well in. And then perhaps to finish off the Q&A session, Mr. Konneberg, you can talk about directions in light of those strengths in Korea's mobility ecosystem, what type of cooperation we could expect between Korea and Germany with regards to mobility. So I'll first turn to Dr. Park.
In fact, Korea actually has been developing a fuel cell vehicle technology for more than 15 years. Well, in that long period, I mean, all the Korean, not only OEM, Tier 1 and Tier 2 have their own core technology. And we localize all the 100% of its core component, which means we have the price competitiveness compared to the other advanced country. So that's, I think, our strong point for the fuel cell. For the electric vehicle, as you know, we have a global battery player, Samsung, LG, and SK, and actually they can easily build for the battery-based future mobility market. So I think that's our great strengths in the future mobility market.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Park. And perhaps, Mr. Konneberg, in light of some of the strengths that we find in the Korean mobility ecosystem, where are some areas that you see for greater cooperation between Germany and Korea with regards to mobility?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think one part could be where we are beneficial, where we could beneficial is on the recycling part. If you think about that, and it was said before, the big manufacturers concerning batteries, LG, SK, Samsung, here the technology comes from Korea. And kind of like we have at the Volkswagen Group come up with a concept for recycling of 95%, 90 to 99%. So that could be a good cooperation model. And I think this is one part. The other part, of course, I could see is when we look at the technology part concerning fuel cell. Yes, it's right. Fuel cell has been here a major push. If you look at the efficiency in general terms speaking at the moment between an electric drivetrain and hydrogen, electric drivetrain is around about at 70, hydrogen is around about at 30, so the efficiency is different. But for models like, for example, if you look in long-term transportation, truck, bus business, aeroplanes, ships, there I can see that the hydrogen is actually the superior technology at the moment. And this could be also certainly a cooperation model. That would be my short answer. I'm very sorry for that. I have to leave to the exhibition again. I'm super sorry. I hope it's okay. But I really enjoyed being part of this webinar.
Thank you so much, Mr. Konneberg, in the middle of your busy schedule for joining us. I'm told that we had many questions on the YouTube channel, but unfortunately due to time we'll be unable to answer them, but hopefully even after the virtual dialogue we will be able to continue this discussion on green transitions in Korea and Germany, especially when it comes to how we can cooperate in that arena. I would like to thank all of our distinguished guests as well as panelists today, both those who are in the studio and those who have been able to join online. Thank you also to our virtual audience who have made the discussion even more lively, and we look forward to continuing all of these discussions and dialogues into the future. This is just the second dialogue of the virtual dialogue series organized by the Korea Foundation, and the third virtual dialogue will take place on June 10th under the topic of prospects for Swedish-Korean renewable energy cooperation, sharing lessons and experiences. So please do stay tuned for that. Thank you again to the organizers of the virtual dialogue, the Korea Foundation, the German Embassy in Seoul, as well as Agora Energiewende. It was a pleasure to moderate today's dialogue, and thank you very much to all of our participants once again. 감사합니다.